hardest when working on these etudes for a region or an all-state audition is getting your tempo up to the speed that's recommended. So today I'm going to walk you through how to practice building up your tempo without sacrificing your tone and your technique. For my example today, I'm going to be using an etude from Karg-Elert, and this is the third etude in his series of 30 Caprices. This is number 3. It's an F major, and it happens to be the first selection of the TMEA 2020 All-State Flute auditions. There's a lot of finger work going on. If you look at measure 14, there's some very fast 30-second note turns. So first of all, if you actually look at that first turn, you've got C natural to D, and in order to do that C, D, C really quickly, instead of going from a C and then adding all of these fingers for a D and going back, there's no time for that. So what you're going to do is you're going to do a C, then you're just going to add that first trill finger in order to play the D. So it's going to go C, D, C really quickly. Little tricks like that are very useful when you're trying to work on an etude where speed is one of the main elements. And this etude is definitely one where you need to have your fingers cooperating for you at all times. So the first thing I like to do when I'm looking at measure 14, I see that underneath the word grazioso is written, and that's an Italian word that means graceful. So as you're playing this, your mind might be a little bit frantic, and your fingers may even feel a little bit frantic, but you have to make it appear as if you are graceful, because that's the instruction from the composer. So how do we play gracefully when we're trying to fit all of those notes into one measure? One thing it has to do with is your fingers. If your fingers are flying off of your keys, there's no way you can be graceful, because there's literally not time for your fingers to get back without making lots of noise. A good way to practice having graceful fingers is to actually look in a mirror and watch yourself as you play and see which of those fingers are going too far away from the keys as you're playing. And that will be a good indicator of which fingers you need to watch for when you're playing technical passages. Another thing that will help you sound graceful as you are playing a very technical part of an etude is your air, and letting your air continue through the entire measure or the entire phrase. And I'm going to play it at just a medium speed. I'm not going to play it up to tempo yet. And I'm just going to try to play it gracefully. So I'm thinking about my fingers being close to the keys as well as my air continuing through each note. Okay, so I'm keeping my fingers as close as possible to the keys, and then I'm keeping my air going. Now you'll notice that there are some different articulations in here. You've got 4 notes slurred followed by 2 notes that are tongued. So when you have those staccatos, that doesn't mean your air has to completely stop. Your tongue is just interrupting the air, but you're keeping that air fluid throughout. Okay, so now we know what our style is and how it needs to sound, but now we've got to figure out how am I going to fit all those notes in and play up to speed. So if you go to tmea.org and you look at that first etude, it gives you a tempo range that you are supposed to try to achieve as you're learning this etude. So you can start at the low end, which is 104, and if that is the most comfortable speed for you, then that's where you should stop. If you feel like you want to go faster, it gives you all the way up to 126 beats per minute, and that's the quarter note beat. So it's kind of up to you how comfortable you feel with your fingers. Now, if you're getting up to 120 and 124 and your fingers are all over the place and you're not able to be in control of the notes, then I would suggest taking it down a few clicks, and there's no shame in doing it at the lower end. And I actually prefer 104 to 126 for this particular etude. I feel that 126 is a little bit on the fast side. So with that being said, let me show you how I work up the speed of a piece. So I like to take my metronome, and I just use a metronome on my phone. This is called Tonal Energy, and it is a tuner as well as a metronome. It has a lot of really cool features, and you can get this on the App Store. I think it's a couple of dollars, but it's well worth it. But if you don't want to spend any money, you can also download plenty of free metronomes. You can also go online and just type in free metronome, and there's several metronomes online that you can access for free. So let's say my goal tempo, my top tempo that I want to get to is 104 beats per minute. So that's my quarter note. So I'm obviously not going to start there. You never want to start at full tempo. You need to give your fingers and your brain time to process the notes that you're playing and the style. Okay, so I've got my metronome set at 60 quarter note beats per minute, and I'm starting at measure 14, and I'm just playing that one measure. I am looking for 3 things while I play. I'm making sure my fingers are nice and close to the keys. That's going to be really helpful once we speed up that tempo. I'm also making sure that my air is flowing throughout the measure. And then the third thing I'm watching for is articulation, making sure that my articulations match exactly what's on the paper. And another thing I like to do, this is just a personal thing, but I find it to be really helpful, is when I'm playing a measure and I'm stopping at the end of that measure, I like to play the first note of the next measure just to kind of continue the phrase so that I don't get used to stopping right at the end of a measure and I get used to that phrase continuing. Okay, so that was 60 beats per minute, but maybe you're not quite up to that tempo even. You can slow it down even more. If you start going lower than 60 beats per minute for your quarter note, I would suggest that you start adding in subdivisions. So another really nice thing about this tuner is you can go up to the top and you can actually tell it to add the 8th note subdivisions, which is what I'm going to do. And that really just helps you to keep track of where you are in the measure. Once it starts getting really slow and that quarter note tempo gets slower, it gets a little bit hard to track where you are in the measure and to keep that steady beat in your head. So let's say I need to have it at 50. I'm going to bump it down to 50. Okay, so there's my 8th note subdivisions. So let's try it like that. Again, looking for those 3 things I mentioned before. And another thing that's really great about starting very slow is that you're not learning bad habits. Don't let yourself go on if you miss an articulation or you miss a note or something's not right with a rhythm. Make sure you go back and fix that. When I was studying with my teacher in high school, we used a system called the magic number system. So when I would walk into my lesson each week, my teacher would ask me, what is your magic number for this etude or for this solo piece? And I would have to tell them, my magic number is 80, or my magic number is 92, or whatever it was. So what a magic number is your perfect tempo, which means you can play everything at that tempo correctly. Your articulation is correct, your intonation's correct, your breathing, your style, the dynamics, everything is correct, and you're able to play it comfortably at that tempo. So if my magic number right now is, let's say it's 60, because I just played at 60 earlier. So my magic number is 60, and in order for it to be that number, I have to make sure it checks off all of those things. So let's say I've mastered 60 beats per minute for this measure. I've been practicing this measure for a couple days, and now I have got it at 60. I can check off all of those things that I need for my magic number to be correct. So the length of time that you're on a certain magic number just has to do with you personally. How long does it take you to get that articulation correct every time you play it? I have a rule for myself. If I can play it 3 times in a row perfectly, then I've mastered it. If I play it 1 time and it's perfect, and then go to the second time and I miss a note or I miss an articulation, then I have to start back over at 1. So you want 3 total times in a row to be perfect, and then I'm pretty convinced that I've mastered it and I'm able to move on. Now I'm going to bump it up. We're going to speed through a few weeks of practice, and let's say I'm at 92. So my new magic number is going to be 92. All right, I'm pretty satisfied with that. Now I need 2 more times in order for me to be convinced that I've got this magic number down. Okay, 1 more time. So you're going to keep practicing like that until you've reached the tempo that you're most comfortable with. I will say that this particular etude tempo is a little bit fast for what I think it should be. It's listed 104 to 126 on the TMEA website, but on all of the public domain resources, I see 92 as the tempo marking. So there's a little bit of a discrepancy there with the tempo. I will say, as someone sitting behind the screen as a judge, I haven't seen anyone sitting there with a metronome tapping along, making sure you're playing at an exact tempo. As a judge for these blind auditions, I don't want to be sitting behind the screen and freaking out along with you as you're trying to get your fingers to cooperate and play up to that really extremely fast tempo. So if 90 or 92 or 94 is your absolute best and it's your magic number, I say stick with it and own it. I'd rather hear someone play a little bit under tempo with really clean and accurate fingers than to hear someone play at tempo but extremely sloppy and with no control over their instrument. Hopefully these tips are helpful for you as you work on speeding up your etudes and working up to those final performance tempos. If you have any questions about working on specific measures in these etudes or any other etudes, you can always leave me a comment and I'll do my best to answer it. Thank you for watching.